the biggest question that is asked of me is, what are the humanities? And the humanities are something that you do every day, whether you know it or not. It's when you're thinking about life. It's all about critical thinking and contemplating and learning and listening. And it encompasses all the human behaviors of art and culture and literature and language and history and sociology and psychology and all the things that make us human. So that's the humanities. And so that's what we do. We are in the business of convening conversations and critical thinking. And that is what we do every day of our life, each one of you. So I want to say thank you to all of our sponsors, and I have a big list here, but thank you, Center for the Arts, especially Carrie Richey, for and I want to say thank you to our group of community partners and collaborators, the Community Resource Center, the Latino Resource Center, the Awareness Project JH, the Wart Hotel and Silver Dollar Grill, St. John's Episcopal Church, and Grand Teton National Park. And I have to say a special thank you to Letty Lira and Isabel Zumel. Where are they? Letty's translating tonight. Because they started on this journey with me to create 5 months of cultural diversity, community awareness, and Latino programming in our community. So thanks, everyone. And a special thank you to Alfonso Centeno of Abuelitos for providing that great food. And Blanca Moye, who's been a great right-hand man to help me put this all together. And so thank you so much for being here. And I want to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Allie Dunford. She grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and after graduating with a BA in Integrative Physiology from the University of Colorado at Boulder, she decided to move to Jackson to pursue snowboarding and a life closer to the pristine wilderness that we live in here. Although Allie has only been a resident of Teton County for a little over 3 years, she is really making her presence known. She feels Jackson is her home and is committed to investing in its future. Allie is here tonight to share her passion and love for this community. Welcome.
Hello, I'm really happy that all my roommates just walked in on the balcony. I didn't think you guys were gonna make it. All right. Each and every day in the US, Americans waste enough food to fill the Rose Bowl Stadium. Yes, this Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena, California. While I have never seen this stadium in person, it's so easy for me to see that it's nothing shy of mammoth. And to imagine it filled each and every day with food that could have and should have otherwise been eaten seems crippling to our planet's finite resources and just dumb. Nearly 800 million, or 1 in every 9 people on the planet, are starving. Between the US and Europe alone, we waste enough food to feed each one of these people 3 times over. Unfortunately, Jackson Hole is no exception to these realities of food waste and food need. I often find myself asking, how did our food system get so dysfunctional? And how do we get back to something more sustainable and more moral? But let me pause here for a moment and change directions. People often say, think outside the box. In a way, the story of how I got here tonight began because I was thinking outside the box by looking inside the bin. This very trash bin, to be specific. When I moved to Jackson 4 years ago, I found myself frequenting this dumpster day after day on a quest for food. The edible food I was finding was often of so much value, I found myself questioning and in disbelief that the stores had actually thrown this product away. Here's some photos from my dumpster diving days. Lots of produce I would always find. Great stuff. Although there was no feasible way I could consume the volumes of food I was finding day after day, the thrill of it all continuously lured me in. Now, people always ask me two questions when I tell them of my past life as a raccoon. First, was it really nasty in there? My answer, absolutely. It was horrible. It was a dumpster. But I soon paid no mind to the smell and just was having so much fun with the whole thing that nothing could really hold me back. The second question, did you ever get sick eating expired food from a dumpster? The truth, not once. Most of the food I was finding was completely edible. And it was pretty obvious to see what was rotten and what was still good. The old saying, the nose knows, goes a long way as a dumpster diver. So for the standards of most any 22-year-old, my life was pretty great. I was living in paradise, snowboarding as often as I could, and was eating like a queen, all for free. But after 8 months, life threw me a curveball. I opened the large black lid of that very familiar dumpster and peered down on a mountain of packaged chicken breast. After 8 months consuming a diet composed almost entirely of recovered food from this very dumpster, something shifted inside of me as I peered down at the scene. In that moment, I came to really realize food waste and what it meant. These chicken breasts were not only a waste of food, but also a waste of water and fossil fuel used to grow the grain to feed these birds, a waste of human power, antibiotics, hormones, and plenty more carbon to process these birds from life to slaughter to truck to grocer. And what broke my heart the most was to imagine the torture and inhumane living conditions these animals likely endured, all for nothing. All of these resources consumed and abused just to be thrown here, Bonneville County landfill, where Teton County sends all of its waste over 100 miles away. When I think back to these culminating moments in the dumpster and the moments thereafter, I realized I was faced with a crossroads. I could either stand back with complacency and continue to personally benefit from the gluttony of food waste I had discovered, or I could stand up and try with all I had to do something about this problem I had unveiled. And what I knew in my heart was that I did not want to remember myself as a girl who once saw an environmental, an animal, and a social injustice right in front of my own two eyes and decided to look away. Now, 3 years later, with the help of over 50 volunteers and an amazing associate director, Jessica Grave, our team rescues over 20,000 pounds of edible food every month from grocery stores, bakeries, and other food retailers. So what does 20,000 pounds of food even look like? This is enough to fill 4 West Bank sanitation trucks. Another way to think about this is 20,000 pounds is enough food to feed you every meal of every day for the next 15 years. This is a lot of food. As I was starting out with Whole Food Rescue, I was very shocked to learn that 13.5% of our own community members are food insecure. Compared to that global average of 1 in 9, 1 in every 8 Jackson residents go to bed hungry or unsure of where their next meal is coming from. So through the lens of local food waste and food insecurity, the real mission of Whole Food Rescue was born. To solve 2 local issues with one logical solution. Now, utilizing partnerships with over 16 nonprofits, we serve 1,000 people in Teton County with rescued food every week. I feel very fortunate to share this evening with the Awareness Project and the Wyoming Humanities Council. The Awareness Project has spent a tremendous amount of time shedding light on hidden social conditions in this community, such as food insecurity. It's projects and events like this that will bring our community together to talk about these issues and work collaboratively to eradicate them. If you have not done so already, after these presentations, I encourage you to travel down this hallway and take a look at the art collection on display. Now, after getting asked to speak at this event, I spent a lot of time thinking about this idea of activism. And what I found is that for me personally, in many ways, to be an activist is to be an addict. Now, I have two definitions here of addict to help describe my perspective. The first, to abandon oneself to something compulsively. And the second, to devote or surrender oneself to something habitually or obsessively. My dream, my vision, my utopia have become so intrinsically a part of who I am, I physically, mentally, and emotionally cannot quit. No matter how many relationships I have damaged or missed out on, the ski tours and backpacking trips I have regretfully declined, or the stress that intermittently bores me down, I simply cannot quit. And what's more is that I have come to realize that change is seldom created without some form of sacrifice. At times, especially this week of snow, I envy the freedom of my peers. But when I can settle my momentary desires to be a carefree ski bum again, and I tap back into my heart, I know I'm in the right place. Sorry, I'm emotional. I'm in the right place. What I have come to accept is that if we personally want to change, if we want our community or the world to change, we must offer a bit of ourselves for the greater good. Thank you. And what is one thing you can wake up and strive for tomorrow that will help orient you on this path? As the people of Jackson, we are posed with both great opportunities and boundless resources. And with these gifts, I have realized I must also give. I was an inexperienced 20-year-old with nothing but a dream for a better way. Really, you and I are no different in our ability to change the world for the better. We all have the potential right here. What I hope for this night is that my story will inspire you. Inspire you to do something about that thing that will make you teeter the line between activist and addict.
Okay, that was totally unfair to start crying because I'm the biggest crybaby in the world, so. So I want to say thank you, Ellie. That was wonderful. And thank you for sharing your passion and your vision with us. And I want to introduce our next speaker. I want to introduce David Stubbs. David Stubbs is a professional freelance photographer and cinematographer based here in Jackson. Although it's his job, his job, for over 15 years, David has used his passion for photojournalism to produce content for adventure and environmental stories ranging from mountaineering, production, commercial, and documentary news. He has worked in 20 countries. Very impressive. And I want to say that I am so excited for David to share his passion. Welcome, David.
Wow, that's tough to follow, Allie. Hey, everybody. Sometimes teachers do small, remarkable things that stick with us for the rest of our lives. For me, it was the time that Mrs. R, as we called her, gathered our attention with a stare. She peered through her big red glasses with her dark beady eyes under a big curly 80s perm. She looked down the the bridge of her beak-like nose, and we all sat there as students, frozen, thinking we were in trouble. She waited for us to be quiet, and then she dropped the needle to a vinyl record, and an orchestra started to play. And then it was followed by Ray Charles singing Georgia on My Mind. I had heard this song before, but never really listened. Nobody understood why we were listening to records in 6th grade social studies class. This was 1988 in Atlanta, Georgia. But there was something about this song that, for me, touched me that day, and it rang out. And it felt timeless and hard fought. This was, when the song finished, nobody said a word. And Mrs. R, as we called her, she let the song ring out, and she let the silence kind of settle in over us. This is how class began the first time that I was introduced to the civil rights movement. By the end of that class, I would never look at my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia the same. Until that day, I didn't really understand or have a clue about the racial tensions or injustice that pretty much filled the daily lives of the town that I was growing up in. Though forced segregation was over at this time, Atlanta existed throughout my time there as a city divided. There was a line in the sand in the city where I grew up. North of the city was white, and south of the city was black. And as a kid, I didn't really understand how an invisible line could divide a town like a tangible wall. It was a wall without windows that fostered fear, mainly. People live self-segregated all over the world. Some say it's cultural or purely socioeconomic. People want to feel safe, and some think it's human nature to find comfort with people that are like ourselves and to fear what is different. But I've only found that fear fosters misunderstanding, injustice, and ultimately just more fear. One of the final and most influential experiences of my life in the South happened 10 years later in the summer of 1998. I had just finished my first year working as a full-time photojournalist. I was based in Athens, Georgia. I shot mainly hard news stories and some music as well. I was back in Atlanta, and I was visiting friends. We were there to see the annual Atlanta Jazz Festival. This classic park where it happens it's called Piedmont Park. It's not unlike Central Park in New York City and designed by the same architect. Basically, we were walking with hundreds towards Piedmont Park, and we crested a rise to where you could look down this sloping hillside to the stage, and before us there were thousands of people. And when I saw that moment, it changed really the way I saw the world. From where I stood, the crowd of thousands perfectly resembled an untouched box of Neapolitan ice cream, minus the strawberry. I'm talking right when you open it for the first time and you can't help but be puzzled how they got that perfect line between the chocolate and vanilla. I decided that day I would never live in the South again. I was done. Lucky for me, photography was my ticket and I left. I was fortunate enough to carve out a career shooting assignments and selling images from all over the world. I spent basically every dime I had to go shoot in Europe, in Latin America, South America, ultimately in Asia. What I found was that the more foreign a culture was to me, the stronger connections to other humans I found. The more difficult the barriers of language, religion, and new customs, the greater my curiosity. As long as I was completely open to anything and I approached people with humility, no matter where I went, I was somehow welcomed with a camera. Make no mistake, I was there to make images and tell stories. But it was always about learning something, trying to gain some understanding, chipping away at cultural barriers, divides that were there generations before I showed up. And when some tiny breakthrough was made and some new understanding occurred, it felt like this intangible feat. At the most basic human level, connecting, overcoming cultural barriers, and connecting with someone, sharing perspectives and opening each other's minds, it just feels good. It feels like you were privy to some lost instinct of what it's like to be human. I've talked about where I came from and what drives some of my work. Now I'd like to talk about home here in Jackson. I moved here in 1999 to work for the Jackson Hole Guide as a writer and a photographer. greater Yellowstone had its claws in me from day one. I saw a lifetime of exploration here without limits, and I still do. I saw a community that had chosen a path that was not really available anywhere else, and that was the hook, is that this place is unlike anywhere else. But now I'm seeing some of the same cultural divides, lack of assimilation and understanding that I tried to get away from in the South. We have overt anti-immigration rhetoric here, racism in the mainstream media. We have an immigrant population in Jackson of Russians, Europeans, some Asians, and Latinos as well. There are some here that came legally. There are some here that came illegally. Maybe some have lived in the shadows for so long that the second generation is now living in the same shadow of fear. To answer the rhetorical question of why not just immigrate to the United States legally, I want to give an example that's pretty close to home. My wife, Billy, a German national, she's here tonight. Billy and I kept a relationship going across an ocean for 4 years on visa waivers. 3 months apart, 3 months together, until ultimately U.S. immigration authorities would no longer grant Billy visa waivers, and we decided to get married to make it official. That was in 2004. Billy applied for a green card and resident status. We hired an attorney. We had a financial sponsor. We spoke English, and we had a college degree. And yet still, we unknowingly violated the terms of travel during the application time, and Billy was denied access into the United States for almost 2 years, even though we had been married here in Jackson. Now imagine coming to the United States for a new life with no financial resources, with no language ability, in English that is, and trying to navigate a system that even immigration attorneys today have a hard time fully grasping, because the policies are ever changing and the bureaucracy is really hard to navigate as well. Assimilation or integration is defined as the endpoint when individuals only minimally perceive themselves and others in ethno-racial and national terms. The Migration Policy Institute, a think tank based in Washington, D.C., has been compiling data for over 100 years from Europe and the United States with immigration and assimilation. In order to understand how immigrants and host communities are faring currently in the United States, Dr. Thomas Jimenez, a Stanford professor and a member of the Institute, looked at 5 key dimensions of immigrant integration: socioeconomic attainment, citizenship and political participation, residential locale, and social life. Data from these 5 areas are available through records, again, going back over 100 years. Generally, they're measured by looking at the changes between first and second generation immigrant families. First, understand that America has maintained a laissez-faire approach, or no formal assimilation policy in its history, and continues this way today. There are no rules or directed programs. The idea is to let immigrants and the host families evolve naturally. Here's what Dr. Jimenez found. Though the pace of integration varies depending on the origin of immigrants and the places in which they settle, the master trend today looks strikingly similar to the patterns of integration among the major wave of European immigrants to the United States that took place a century ago. I know this is dense, but essentially what this means is that no matter where we came from, what color our skin is, and what language we speak, we all adjust and assimilate within our communities at roughly the same rate across generations in the United States. What he also found was that the 2 biggest obstacles for immigrant assimilation from first to second generations are language and legal status. Once these 2 obstacles have been overcome, immigrant groups advance at roughly the same societal standards as non-immigrant groups from one generation to the next. I think everyone would agree that the perception in this country is very different than what this study finds. This study undermines the very essence of racist rhetoric. It also calls for a policy to help undocumented immigrants that are here attain legal status. Again, learning English and attaining legal status levels the playing field for hardworking people and families that are our neighbors. It also puts enormous responsibility on our schools and policymakers. So what are we afraid of? Let's pull back for a minute from a local to a global perspective. In the past year, Germany has taken in over 1 million refugees from the Middle East and North Africa. The country whose horrific policies of the 1930s and 40s that took the world to war is now granting asylum at an unprecedented rate. For 2 to 3 generations now, the German culture has progressed through decades of shame into a people known for compassion, openness, and pacifism. Already, far-right nationalist movements in Germany and other European nations are rising up with anti-immigrant racist rhetoric. The coming years will define whether Germans can transcend a rising fear of what is different and what is unknown. I love watching my 7-year-old run to greet Spanish-speaking friends on every playground in town. I love going to schools here in Jackson. I love seeing how diverse our community is whenever I go to the schools. I love watching a new generation of Latinos learning to ski with the Doug Coombs Foundation. I love that my 7-year-old is speaking Spanish thanks to the dual immersion program, and she's already surpassed my own abilities. But what I really crave personally is to understand some of the perspectives of the parents of my kids' friends. I want to learn about their culture and customs. I want to learn about their challenges and triumphs here because their community and my community is the same. We are neighbors, and we've been neighbors since before our kids were even born. Yet for some reason, it's proved harder to connect here in this community than it has for me in any other country I've visited or worked in. Why is this? When I ask non-immigrant white residents about these barriers and the divide within our valley community, I often hear it's a cultural thing. But I think this is a cop-out. The language and socioeconomic barriers in this community are a fact. But without a real effort and actual outgoing welcome, we cannot transcend these issues. As a community and as individuals, we have to take a risk socially to reach out. Our language skills don't have to be perfect. We will be awkward. We will make mistakes. But we have to at least try. Over the next year, I'll be documenting the lives of immigrant families in our community to bring awareness about the plight of our neighbors whose lives still remain in these shadows. This project is about the people whose stories I'm documenting, but it's also about my own journey to try to overcome barriers and learn Spanish. What if fear of what is different isn't human nature at all, but a weakness, a behavior that we learn over our lifetime, over generations and wars? What if we could evolve simply by watching and learning from our kids? What if we could learn to approach the unknown and what is different, not with fear, but with the instinct that drives our kids, curiosity? What kind of community do we want to live in this town? I'd ask you to please follow Ann Muller's awareness project. Check out her amazing pictures. She's worked on over 10 years. I'd also ask you to please support the Dual Immersion Program and the Doug Coombs Foundation, and to take a risk as individuals. Thanks.
Wow. That was another tearjerker, I have to say. Thanks, David. So our last and final presentation is such a treat. And this is the Jackson Hole Middle School Latino Leadership Team. And they're going to give voice to what it means to grow up Latino in Jackson Hole. And they will be led by their teacher, Michelle Brooks. So welcome, Michelle. This is their first presentation they've ever made.
We actually just wanted to give you a little bit of about a context for this. This is the JHMS. These are the 6th and 7th grade Latino leaders. Some of them are just finding out they're in the Latino Leader Program. They were nominated by teachers, and so they were like, wait, what? So this is my colleague, Kelly Kaiser. She's the 7th grade representative or teacher, and I'm the 6th grade representative. And we meet with these students for 20 minutes each morning. So we found out about this opportunity in late December, and January 1st, we wrote the script. It took us an hour, and then we've practiced. So they've known about this opportunity for 3 hours. And I tell you this because it's amazing what you can do in 3 hours. And it's also to say that we're trying to emphasize to these guys that activism isn't about having things perfectly planned. It's about showing up, and it's about speaking up. And so tonight, we're super proud of them because they showed up. And my friend Sarah always tells me that's the hardest thing to do. So they showed up. So just a round of applause for them showing up. And now it's time to hear their voices. Okay, I might just...
We are Colts.
No, let's try that again.
We are Colts.
Climbing over the
Now,
top of
society. We struggle with cruel words.
When Donald Trump said in his speech, I will build a
Great, great wall.
on our southern border and I'll make
Mexico.
pay for that wall.
Mark my words.
And Americans cheered.
We will say
If they sent my parents home, who would take care of me?
would I be alone?
Would I be adopted? Would I go back too? I was born in the United States. Yet when I hear those words,
I don't feel welcome.
we struggle with papers.
Everyone has different papers.
Or no papers. We are the same family and yet we all belong differently. When the media comes,
No matter what papers we have,
we
we
are
are scared.
We were born here.
Yet I don't feel safe.
We struggle with language.
I translate for my
Mom, Dad, Grandma, myself,
all the time.
I translate to
My mother's boss,
my father's boss, the insurance company, the doctor. And that scares me.
what if I get it wrong?
What are these words? Does she know what is happening? What if she gets fired?
Jobs are so hard to find.
They are horrible. We struggle with missing family members who are
So far away.
missing
Cousins, aunts, uncles,
nieces and nephews. My dad. My brother and sister.
pets. I want society to quiet down so I can
Hear my abuelita. See my abuelito. Be at home.
We are Colts, climbing
Over the
talk of
society. Yes, school is a challenge.
yes, school is hard.
And it's hard to keep up. To do the work. To understand the direction. To come
But
I challenge myself. To
get better grades, take harder classes,
To become more confident. others. I am a poet.
I am a speaker.
I stand up for others.
Because I know it will
Dictate my future.
We are cults.
Climbing
Over the
now. Talk of
society.
Our
family triumph.
Our family's own thriving businesses in town.
I feel pride.
My uncle Jimmy triumphed as a police officer in Jackson, Wyoming.
My parents triumph and learn English as adults.
My brother Victor is in Mesa University in Colorado.
We feel pride.
We triumph when Obama says in his State of the Union address,
Heard across the world.
I see the future in the
Dreamer who stays up late to finish
her science project, and the teachers will come in early.
Because he knows.
She might someday cure a disease. We triumph because Obama knows that already today, dreamers are an important part of our community.
and we triumph each time. Sisters, brothers, cousins, friends, kids who look like us, who speak like us, go to college. To truly be cool, we must climb over the now.
Talk of
Ourselves. I will ignore racist comments, the drama, low expectations, my own self-talk. I will change my mind,
my parents' mind, my teachers' minds.
I will change your mind. We will change the world.
We are cults, a community of
Leaders, talking